So today I want to go over the Balfour Declaration, the contents thereof, and the politics, or part of the politics that was a part of making that Balfour Declaration. So we're going to go ahead and get started on Wikipedia. The Balfour Declaration was a public statement issued by the British government in 1917 during the First World War, announcing support for the establishment of a national homeland for the Jewish people in, as they say, Palestine. Now, those of you who don't understand and don't know why the name Palestine is offensive, now the name of that king is slipping my mind, or that emperor. So I'll keep on reading this when Hadrian. Okay, so Hadrian all right, shortly before or after the Bar Kokhba revolt of 132 to 135, the Roman Emperor Hadrian changed the name of the Judea province and merged it with Roman Syria. To form Syria Palestina, and founded Aelia Capitolina in the ruins of Jerusalem, which some scholars conclude was done in an attempt to remove the relationship of, of the Jewish people to the region. Or simply put it, to erase the name of Judea and Israel and Jerusalem forever. Yes. What was the Kokhba revolt all about? And what was Hadrian's response to it? Well, look at here. After the crushing the Kokhba revolt, the Roman Emperor Hadrian applied the name Syria Palestina to the entire region that had formerly included the Judea province. Some allege that Hadrian wanted to choose a name that revived the ancient name of Palestine, or should read Pelasheth, and combine it with that of the neighboring province of Syria in an attempt to suppress Jewish connection to the land. That was the reason. It was to remove the Jews from the Holy Land forever. So when I start reading the Balfour Declaration, I want everyone to understand how serious and critical it was for the British to get it right, and they got it wrong. All right, they claim it is not supported in the historical record. Well, it might not be supported in the historical record, but the actions of Hadrian proved it to be true. Okay. The name Judea had been derived from the kingdom of Judah. All right, as you can see the map here, the kingdom of Judah is in yellow, and the kingdom of Israel is in blue. And as you can see, when you look at the map of Judea and Samaria today, where the kingdom of Judah was, a great big chunk of the kingdom of Judah, the world thinks belongs to the Fakestinians, the Hadrian crowd. All right. which had arisen in the region of the 9th century BCE, is correct. In the 8th century, becoming a vassal of the Neo-Assyrian Empire, the name Philistia, Palestine, Pelesheth in Hebrew, was derived from the Philistines, people who had arisen in the land between the late Bronze Age and early Iron Age in the 12th century. Both Judeans and the Philistines were conquered and exiled by Nebuchadnezzar between 604 and 586 BCE upon the rise of the Neo-Babylonian Empire. Okay, now we'll go back to the Balfour Declaration. Then an Ottoman region with a small minority Jewish population. The declaration was contained in a letter dated the 2nd of November. Now, watch these dates carefully, folks. 1917, from the United Kingdom's Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour to Lord Rothschild, a leader of the British Jewish community, for transmission to the Zionist Federation of Great Britain and Ireland. The text of the declaration was published in the press on the 9th of November 1917. Immediately following their declaration of war on the Ottoman Empire in November 1914, the British War Cabinet began to consider the future of, as they say, Palestine. Within 2 months, a memorandum was circulated to the cabinet by a Zionist cabinet member, Herbert Samuel. Obviously, was a Jew. Proposed the support of Zionist ambitions in order to enlist the support of Jews in the wider war. Remember what I said. The politics of the creation of the Balfour Declaration. What was the real reason behind it? Was it to do the right thing? We're going to find out in just a minute. So, this Zionist cabinet member, Herbert Samuel, proposed the support of Zionist ambitions in order to enlist the support of Jews in the wider war. So he presented the reasoning, which of course I'm sure he had a different reason in mind, but he presented the reasoning to the cabinet in order to convince the British that they could get the Jews on their side. All right? A committee was established in April 1915 by Prime Minister H.A. Asquith to determine their policy toward the Ottoman Empire, including, as they say, Palestine. Asquith, who had favored post-war reform of the Ottoman Empire, resigned in December 1916. His replacement, David Lloyd George, favored partition of the Ottoman Empire. The first negotiation between the British and the Zionists took place at a conference on the 7th of February 1917 that included Sir Mark Sykes, the Zionist leadership. Subsequent discussions led to Balfour's request on the 19th of June that Rothschild and Chaim Weizmann submit a draft of a public declaration. Further drafts were discussed by the British cabinet during September and October, with input from Zionist and anti-Zionist Jews, but with no representation from the local population in, as they say, Palestine. Okay, so far, so good. Listen carefully. Once again, the politics of the Balfour Declaration. By late 1917, in lead up to the Balfour Declaration, the wider war had reached a stalemate, with two of British allies not fully engaged. The United States had yet to suffer a single casualty, and the Russians were in the midst of a revolution with Bolsheviks taking over the government. So a stalemate occurred in southern Palestine, as they say, was broken by the Battle of Beersheba on the 31st of October 1917. The release of the final declaration was authorized on the 31st of October. The preceding cabinet discussion had referenced perceived propaganda benefits amongst the worldwide Jewish community for the Allied war effort. Did you get that? Did you get that? The preceding cabinet discussion had referenced perceived propaganda benefits among the worldwide Jewish community for the Allied. They succeeded. They succeeded in bringing the Jewish community on their side. The opening words of the Declaration, because of the Declaration, you see, the opening words of the Declaration represented the first public expression of support for Zionism of a major political power. Notice it says the opening words of the Declaration represented the first public expression of support for Zionism in a major political power. The term national home had no precedent in international law and was intentionally vague. Okay, those two words, intentionally vague, the only reason why they would go together is to deceive. To hide the truth. Maybe that would be the better way of saying it. To hide the truth. To hide their intentions. Was their intention really to have a homeland for the Jews in, as they say, Palestine? Was intentionally vague as to whether a Jewish state was contemplated. The intended boundaries of Palestine were not specified. And the British government later, only later, when they got the Jews on board, in the World War I effort. Yes, folks, it was pure politics. Later confirmed that the words "in Palestine" meant that the Jewish national home was not intended to cover all of Palestine. That sounds like I smoked, but I didn't inhale. It sounds like it doesn't, or it depends on what the meaning of the word is, you see. Now, when Balaam acted this way, an angel came and almost killed him. Later confirmed that the words "in Palestine" meant that the Jewish national home was not intended to cover all of Palestine. Okay. All right. So, I'm going to expose the lie in this. World War I was before World War II, right? Right. At least 6 million Jews were murdered in the 1930s and the 1940s. Right? Right. Now, I have to tell you this, folks. It's a little secret that I've been keeping for a long time. The man, I believe, is dead now. So I'll go ahead and say it. There was a man, an old man in Israel, who used to call me every now and then. His name is Moshe. And his parents brought him as a child from Russia. His parents told him that the Bolsheviks, the communists, murdered 20 million Jews. Now, of course, that atrocity would not be in historical records today, because many of the folks, or I should say, the man who is in power in Russia today was a KGB agent at the time of the fall of the Berlin Wall. He does not want his country to have to pay reparations to the Jews like Nazi Germany. So those records remain in secret. He was literally weeping over the phone when he told me that the Russians murdered 20 million Jews during the in the days of I believe it was Joe Stalin. He told me Joe Stalin had done it. So what am I getting at? Do you honestly think that all the Jews that lived during the time of the Balfour Declaration could possibly have fit into this tiny sliver of land? That the world wants Israel to be its final borders? As they say, the 67 borders, it would not be possible. It would not be possible. You know it, and I know it. You're not going to fit that many people in a country the size of New Jersey. It doesn't work. So what I'm telling you is, homeland for the Jews has to be able to fit all the Jews around the world comfortably. And then they turn around. And they do this. The opening words of the Declaration represented the first public expression of support for Zionism by a major political power. The term national home had no precedent in international law. National home means all the Jews must be able to fit in there comfortably, folks. And they can't, which is the reason why the vast majority of the Jews are outside of Israel or murdered by Europe and Russia. and was intentionally vague as to whether a Jewish state was contemplated. Well, folks, if you say that if you use the term national home, what does that mean to you? It means a Jewish state. The intended boundaries of Palestine were not specified. The British government later confirmed that the words "in Palestine" meant that the Jewish national home was not intended to cover all of Palestine, which really means there was no intention to have a Jewish homeland anywhere in the Middle East, quite frankly. And the actions of the British Empire during World War II proved that point. When many Jews tried to escape Europe and go to the Holy Land, British soldiers blocked them, forced them back into the European countries where they came from, where they were later gassed and thrown into ovens. So the British were party to the atrocities against the Jews. So here we have the unvarnished truth. The second half of the Declaration was added. What? Was added, which means it did not belong there. The second half did not belong there. As soon as they got the Jews on their side, they changed the game. The second half of the Declaration was added to satisfy opponents of the policy, who had claimed that it would otherwise prejudice the position of the local population of Palestine and encourage anti-Semitism worldwide by stamping the Jews as strangers in their native lands. So, they added this part. The Declaration called for the safeguarding of the civil and religious rights of the Palestinian Arabs who compose the vast majority of the local population, and also the rights and political status of the Jewish communities in other countries outside of Palestine. In other words, they had no intention of encouraging the Jewish communities to leave the countries outside of Palestine, as they say, and move into the Holy Land. Because of that, untold millions of Jews were murdered. Now, so the British government acknowledged in 1939 that the local population's views should have been taken into account and recognized in 2017 that the Declaration should have called for the protection of the Palestinian Arabs' political rights. They didn't mean it. They did not mean, okay, so in the first part of the Declaration. So let's have a look at the Declaration. Now, the text is very small, so I'll read it out to you. Dear Lord Rothschild, I have much pleasure in conveying to you on behalf of His Majesty's government the following declaration of sympathy with the Jewish Zionist aspirations. Yes, they misspelled here. Aspirations, which had been submitted to and approved by the Cabinet His Majesty's government view with favor for the establishment in Palestine a national home for the Jewish people and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object. That was the first part. Now, there was an old Indian chief in the Americas who said these words: "White man speak with forked tongue." What does that mean? Like a serpent. Like the devil. Well, this is a classic example of speaking with forked tongue. They added this, the rest of it, after the fact, trying to undo what they did, what they started, because they did not mean it. But here's the problem. Here's the problem. The promise was already made. It can't be undone. You cannot make this promise that I just read here. Listen carefully again. You cannot undo it just by adding an addendum to it. You can't. That's not how it works, especially when it comes to the Holy Land. Dear Lord Rothschild, I have much pleasure in conveying to you on behalf of His Majesty's government the following declaration of sympathy with the Jewish Zionist aspirations. Now, what are the Jewish Zionist aspirations? It's called Eretz Israel. E-R-E-T-Z, Israel. Look it up. Which has been submitted to and approved by the Cabinet, His Majesty's government. View with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. Did it say for some of the Jewish people? When it says for the Jewish people, it means the Jewish people. It means all of them. And will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object. Well, guess what? The British Empire made a promise, and the British Empire is going to be forced to keep it. And every nation who has laid hold of that mandate, which incidentally, that mandate was handed over to the United Nations, which means every member of the United Nations now have the duty and responsibility of the first half of the Balfour Declaration. In other words, every member of the United Nations now must keep this promise to the full. And if you don't, curses will come. Never mind what is written in the second half. The second half is an addendum to try to undo the first half, as we just read. And here's what the second half says. It being clearly understood that nothing shall be done that may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine. Now let me ask you a question. If you're going to make a homeland for the Jews in Palestine, for all the Jews around the world, that means the non-Jews in Palestine, as they say, have got to go. You see what they've done here? They're like, oh, we didn't really mean that. Or the rights and the political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country. In other words, it's like saying, what we really want all these Jews in the other countries to stay there. But what happened? What happened to the political rights, the rights and political status of Jews enjoyed in all the other countries. What happened to it? It got thrown in the ovens. That's what happened. You see, every nation member of the United Nations now is under the same responsibility as the British and under the same curse if they do not follow through with the real Balfour Declaration. You cannot, when it comes to the Holy Land, you have to speak the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. You cannot make counter arguments against your first argument. And it says, I should be grateful if you would bring this declaration to the knowledge of the Zionist Federation. All right? And if you want further proof, all right? Yes. Oh, wait a minute. Well, this was afterwards. Hold on. Oh, come on. What just happened here? All right. Let me see if it's in this one. Oh, wait a minute. I just saw the headline that I really want. Shameful British, shameful record on the Holocaust. Now, unfortunately, when I go and look at this, that Haaretz is going to, I believe, going to block most of it. Yes, but maybe most of it will be in this first paragraph. Britain's shameful record on the Holocaust and Labour's sellout of Jewish survivors. Despite its pride in rescuing several thousand Jewish children before World War II, the truth is that successive British governments failed Europe's Jews before the Holocaust and afterwards. No, it's not covering the whole thing here. I'm having, let's see here, Whitehall and the Jews. I think this might be it. All right. Whitehall and the Jews, 1933 through 1948, British immigration policy, Jewish refugees, and the Holocaust. The flight of the Jews out of Nazi Germany had been the subject of much attention. Virtually every country that witnessed the entry of Jews in the 1930s had its experience discussed in at least one book. Britain is no exception. The historical investigation of Jewish immigration into Britain began with the opening of government archives in the 1970s. Though prior to this, many contemporaries wrote their accounts of the movement of European Jews to Britain as early as 1936. Whilst the migration of Jews was still underway, Norman Bentwich published The Refugees from Germany, April 33 to December 1935, covered the first wave of arrivals. This is not what I was looking for. I'm talking about they blocked the Jews from going into the Holy Land. See. A lot of mumbo jumbo here. Let's try to word this a little different. And we'll remove this. Well, we know that restriction on Jewish immigration to Palestine. Let's see if it's here. Okay. All right. Remember this guy, Herbert Samuel? You heard his name? A British Jew who served as first High Commissioner of Palestine, as they say, placed restrictions on Jewish immigration in the interest of the present population and the absorptive capacity of the country. Well, the promise was to have a homeland for the Jews in Palestine, as they say. So now they stopped it because the lack of absorptive capacity of the country. So what they did is, instead of keeping the promise of the first part of the Balfour Declaration, they only went with the second part, which was added later. But the first part is the promise that was made that cannot be broken. The influx of Jewish settlers was said to be forcing the Arab fellahin from their land. This was at a time when less than 1 million people lived in an area that now supports more than 6 million people. You see the treachery here, folks? The British actually limited the absorptive capacity of Palestine by partitioning the country. Joel 3. In 1921, Colonel Secretary Winston Churchill rewarded Sharif Hussein's son Abdullah for his contribution to the war. Didn't reward the Jews at all for their contribution to the war. They baited the Jews to jump on their side with a promise. A bold promise of a homeland for the people of the Jews in, as they say, Palestine. And then they add an addendum. A knife in the back of the Jews to the Balfour Declaration. Abdullah's son, or Hussein's son Abdullah, for his contribution to the war against Turkey. As a consolation prize for the Hijaz and Arabia going to the Saudi family, Churchill installed him as emir. Churchill severed nearly 4/5. Okay, 4/5 of the land that was promised to the Jews, and gave it to Transjordan. Some 35,000 square miles to create a brand new Arab emirate, Transjordan. The British went further and placed restrictions on Jewish land purchases in what remained of Palestine. I thought we were supposed to have a homeland for the Jews in Palestine. contradicting the provisions of the Mandate, Article 6, that stated that the administration of Palestine shall encourage, in cooperation with the Jewish Agency, close settlements by Jews on the land, including state lands and wastelands not acquired for public purposes. By 1949, however, the British had allotted 87,500 acres of the 187,500 acres of cultivatable land to the Arabs and only 4,250 acres to the Jews. This made for Jewish acquisition of immigration certificates extremely difficult. That was the intention. This is exactly what Pharaoh would have done. As the world entered the Second World War, request for entry was difficult. Yes, this is the one that I wanted. It took me a while to find it, but those of you who are patient enough with me, now you know. Now you know the real story. It was difficult to accommodate to Jews all over the world. They jerked the rug out from underneath all the Jews around the world. They made a promise, then they reneged. I'm telling you, that makes the British equally responsible for the Holocaust, and any nation, any Gentile nation that joins with the United Nations is equally responsible for the Holocaust, because they have now laid their hands upon the mandate of Palestine. Correspondence between governing officials in Palestine and Greek Jewish Authority demonstrated the sheer inflexibility. Ultimately, the British admitted the argument about the absorptive capacity of the country was specious. It was a lie. The Peel Commission said the heavy immigration in the years 1936 and 1933 to 1936 would seem to show that Jews have been able to enlarge the absorptive capacity of the country for Jews. They tried desperately to make sure it didn't happen. The British response to Jewish immigration set a precedent of appeasing the Arabs, which was followed for the duration of the mandate. The British placed restriction on Jewish immigration while allowing Arabs to enter the country freely. Arab populations were not considered when attempting to estimate the country's absorptive capacity. Jewish immigration versus Arab immigration. During World War I, the Jewish population declined because of the war, famine, disease, and expulsion. So every Jew that died from the war, famine, disease, and expulsion was partly on the hand who committed the atrocity and partly on the hand of the British Empire for blocking the door to the Jewish homeland. In 1915, approximately 83,000 Jews lived in Palestine among the 590,000 Muslims and Christian Arabs. According to the 1922 census, the Jewish population was 84,000, while the Arabs numbered 643,000. Thus, the Arab population continued to grow exponentially, even while that of the Jews stagnated. In the mid-1920s, the Jewish immigration to Palestine increased primarily because of anti-Jewish economic legislation in Poland and Washington's imposed of restrictive quotas. Washington, D.C., United States of America, is also partly responsible. The record number of immigrants in 1935 was responsible for the growing persecution of Jews in Nazi Germany. The British administration considered this number too large, however, so the Jewish Agency was informed that less than one-third of the quota it asked would be approved in 1936. The British gave in further to Arab demands by announcing in the 1939 White Paper that the independent Arab state would be created within 10 years and that the Jewish immigration was to be limited to 75,000 for the next 5 years. After which it was to cease altogether. Promise completely broken. It also forbade land sales to Jews in 95% of the territory of Palestine. Promise broken. The Arabs nevertheless rejected the proposal. By contrast, throughout the mandatory period, Arab immigration was unrestricted. In 1930, the Hope Simpson Commission, sent from London to investigate the 1929 Arab riots, said the British practice of ignoring the uncontrolled illegal Arab immigration from Egypt, Transjordan, and Syria had the effect of displacing the prospective Jewish immigrants. So now you know what happened, folks. Now you can see, you can witness for yourself the absolute breaking of the Holy Covenant, of the everlasting covenant, as written in Isaiah 24. Oh, hold on. Why is this putting Isaiah Thomas up here? We'll go to Strong's Concordance so that we can read. Jehovah makes the earth empty and makes it waste and turns it upside down and scatters the inhabitants abroad. Why? Verse 4, the earth mourns. Oh, hold on. Verse 3, the land shall be utterly emptied and utterly spoiled, for Jehovah has spoken this word. This speech. The earth will mourn and fade away. The world will languish and fade away, and the haughty people, the great people of this world, of this earth, they will languish. They will become weak. The earth is defiled, polluted under the inhabitants thereof, because they've transgressed the laws, the Torah. They changed the ordinance. Yes, folks, they changed the Balfour Declaration in midstream. And they broke the everlasting berith, the covenant. If you want to read the everlasting covenant, you will find it in Jeremiah 31 verses 31 through 34, and you will find it in Hebrews 8 verses 8 through 12. And Paul covers it briefly in Romans 11 verses 26 through 28. All right? For this reason, the curse has devoured the earth, and those that dwell therein are desolate. And for that reason, the inhabitants of the earth are scorched, and few men left. Now, those of you who follow prophecy, you'll understand that Zechariah 9, Zechariah 12, I believe it is, and Zechariah 14 all foretell the time of the end. One in particular. Joel 3 Tyre and Zidon. We'll go there. The day will come, and that time will come, where he's going to cause the captivity of Judah and Jerusalem to return. He's going to collect the Goy and bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat. Now, for a while I was confused because one scripture says the valley of Jehoshaphat and the other one says the valley of Jezreel. Well, I understand. So check this out. If we read, we'll read this here first, where it says Tyre and Zidon, and the coast of Pelisheth. And Pelisheth, that is what they call, what is that place? Gaza. Yeah. All right. So he's going to gather all the Goy and bring them down to, or bring some of the Goy and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat, because he's going to bring some of them into the Jezreel valley too, and will judge them there for my people, for my heritage Israel. It doesn't say for my heritage Judah, it says for my heritage Israel. But Judah is among Israel, as you know, whom you have scattered among the Goy and parted my land. Well, the partitioning of the land was done by the British, and all the members of the United Nations have joined hands and participated in that after the fact. So he says, and what have I to do, or it just says, doesn't say what have I to do with you, Tyre. It just says Tyre and Zidon, Phoenician city on the Mediterranean Sea, and the coast of Pelisheth, Gaza. So he addresses them first. These are going to be addressed first. Will you give me a recompense? If you recompense me, he's going to swiftly deal with them and speedily, and will return your recompense upon your own head. Why? Because you took my silver and my gold and have carried them into your temples and my goodly pleasant things. The children of Judah and Jerusalem you sold to the Greeks, so that you might remove them far from their border. I will raise them out of the place where you have sold them, the Romans and the Greeks, and will return your recompense upon your own head, and I will sell your sons and your daughters into the hand of the children of Judah, and they shall sell them to the Sabians, black folks in Africa, to a people afar off, because Jehovah has spoken it. So he's going to do this first, it appears. Proclaim ye this among the Goy. Prepare a war, wake up the mighty men, and let all the men of war draw near. Beat your plowshares into swords, and your pruning hooks into spears, and let the weak say, I'm strong, and assemble yourselves. So this is actually this right here. And here's what I mean. I believe that while Lebanon, which is modern day Tyre and Zidon, attacks Israel, that Transjordan will attack Israel from the east, like it says in Zechariah, I believe it's 14, and will take East Jerusalem. Why would Lebanon do such a thing? Why would Lebanon do such a thing? Because of this tiny little coronavirus. Now, I'm not, please do not misunderstand me, folks. In comparison to the swine flu and other diseases like the Black Death, it is tiny. But it is not something to be sneezed at or something to be made light of. But it is tiny in comparison to these other horrible diseases that have occurred over the past millennium. But this little tiny, in comparison, coronavirus has caused the whole world to erupt. Against their leadership. You can look up what's happening in Germany. It's happening right now in Germany. United States, all over the whole world. Especially the Western world. Protesters organizers urge authorities to let mass Jerusalem rally go on all night. As more than 10,000 attend the biggest demonstration yet, Black Flag Group vows to return week after week until corrupt Netanyahu resigns. Protests and riots going on in Judah and Jerusalem, just like what's happening in other Western countries. What's going on here? What is the heart of this? At the heart of this problem? Well, the heart of this problem is this: Western nations, democracies, as they say, representative republics too, they're all Roman-based governments. You give these people years of prosperity, anything they could ever want, and suddenly put a little small pestilence amongst them, and they start rioting. I have said months ago that democracy has failed in Israel. I stand by that statement because, quite frankly, democracy has failed all around the world. And Israel is no exception. It is a form of government that was created to appease the Western overlords. And there are rumors that Lebanon, only rumors, folks, do not, that's all it is. Probably nothing is going to happen tonight. But there are rumors that an attack on the Israelis is going to happen tonight. But it probably won't happen tonight. But there are rumors out there. Why now? Well, as you read, if you've bothered to read, Israel and the Lebanese, or the Hezbollah, have been involved in a little skirmish last week, which killed one of their top guys. The Lebanese have this little so-called Muslim holiday that was going on for the past couple of days, which it ended. Last day was yesterday, I believe it was. Let me look at the last day was yesterday. All right. And if you look on the Israeli news, I think maybe you can find it on Jerusalem Post. Oh my goodness, look at this. Anti-Netanyahu protests hit peak at 60,000. It just gets worse. Elections inch closer after the budget not presented. Early this morning, it's now not on here, but early this morning, you can find it on Twitter. where Israel has been warning the Lebanese, warning Hezbollah not to do what they're planning on doing. So there is rumor floating around that Hezbollah, Lebanon Hezbollah, is planning on attacking Israel tonight. Could be tomorrow night, could be the night after. Why would they do it now? Take a look at this headline. Do you think that they could resist the temptation? With 60,000 people protesting outside Netanyahu's house day and night? No, they couldn't resist. I don't think they could. I could be wrong, but rumor has it. I think maybe I'll even go to Twitter, as much as I don't want to. Show you. I think it's on. You'll find it mostly on Twitter here. Here we go. 1 hour ago, Emmanuel Fabian retweets, "If anyone have any doubts, IDF alertness level on northern Israel remains, entering the 11th day." Well, high alert. They are expecting something coming from the north. All right? Right here, this one right here, this is 12 hours ago. The IDF is on alert in northern Israel. Hezbollah is waging a war of nerves against Israel. Eid al-Adha will last 4 days. It ended yesterday. And Nasrallah is not in a hurry. The assessment in Lebanon is that the revenge attack will be after the holiday. That's the reason why rumor has it that it's going to be tonight. But it's only rumor. And while, let me ask you a question, folks. It's just not just a question, just something to think about. If Hezbollah, Lebanon, decided to go in a full-out assault on Israel from the north, while this big anti-Netanyahu protest is going on, after Benjamin Netanyahu and Benny Gantz was talking about, and Donald Trump was talking about sovereignty over the Jordan Valley and 30% of Judea and Samaria, seeing this, do you think that the king of Jordan would be able to resist? Well, I don't know the answer, folks. While you're thinking about that, I want you to watch the Three Gorges Dam in China. Because if that collapses, China collapses. At least for the most part it does. And I'm just saying watch, because things are on the verge of happening right now. Especially in Lebanon and Israel. Especially with all these riots going on. Anyway, I think that's enough for today.